Let's talk about the business of the day as it relates to theater with your hosts, Darnell Radford and Mitch Weiss. This is The Business of Theater, a working title. Yeah. Mitch, I know we're looking for a working title, but we cannot name the podcast The Business of Theater. Please come to our gala.
Yeah. Wow. Actually, I'd love to use that one, but no, you're right. We can't, especially in competition with the 3 billion other people using it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Gala season.
Tis the season. It's gala season. Get your ball gowns out and your rented tux and your bad shoes and
your big bank accounts with Zelle and Venmo and whatever else you use, credit cards. For
bring your wallet, clear off your credit card, and bring it with you.
For an industry that keeps touting, especially nonprofits, that they have discounted tickets and they're affordable. It's amazing how much they charge for these galas.
Yeah,
thousands of thousands. I got one today, which the ticket price was $100,000 to go to a dinner and to listen to some celebrities talk to you.
Was that the dinner for Orange Man?
Yeah.
Weren't those $100,000 plates?
But see, that's it. Politics and theater should not. I guess it's the same thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Everyone, this is The Business of Theater, a working title. I'm Darnell Radford.
I'm Mitch Weiss.
And let's get down to business. Already in progress.
Already.
Yeah, as we said at the beginning, it is gala season. And so if you're a part of an organization, you know exactly what kind of fresh hell this is. If you are a supporter of an arts organization or a nonprofit in general, you're probably getting inundated by letters and e-blasts and postcards and personal beg requests to come join your gala. And the question I ask every year about anybody's gala is, who is the audience? And can anyone really come? And why would you attend if you're not connected to the organization? This is the part that really boggles my mind because there's an aggressive marketing campaign for all of these fundraisers. And it almost seems like if you didn't spend that money, wouldn't you just have money? And you're right about you're already involved. I mean, sometimes you bring a friend along and they may become a new donor for the company. But for the most part, it's a party for those people who have already donated. Mm-hmm. And now we just want some more. Right? Yeah, it's often it's a look back on your season. You know, you highlight some benchmarks and you celebrate. You know, so I get that. But internally, there's an aggressive goal to raise end of year funding, you know, at that time. And everybody knows it too. So, you know, it brings up so many questions. Like, if you are a supporter of the organization, do you have to like actually sit down and figure out how much you want to support this organization throughout the year and then figure out how to trickle it into their coffers in some consistent way so you're not constantly bogged down by asks, you know? And there's tons of emergency emails that go out about like, we need emergency funding, or this thing you've known, this thing you pass and ignore for the past 70 years will no longer exist. And it almost attacks the community by saying, if you don't respond to this, we're dead. And there's the danger, which has already happened to me this week. There's a danger of insulting your donors because after you've given them money, or you're saying it's not enough.
Right. They're saying, but we noticed you haven't actually paid for your membership and it was overdue. Excuse me, just take some of the money I gave you last week and call it my membership.
Yeah.
Don't send me 5 letters in 1 week saying you do your membership. And then that means they're not noticing I'm a human being or an individual. I'm just part of a mailing list.
Mm-hmm.
And that happens a lot, especially larger organizations.
Yeah. I mean, you have no idea. I mean, I have a lot of email accounts. You know, I have email for my business. I have email for the business I work for. I have email for my theater company, and I have personal emails. And sometimes for these organizations, I get their emails 3 times because somehow I communicated with them through those, or like a friend who works over there emailed me from a personal account, and then I'm in the list and so on. And yeah, it's just like, it is overwhelming. It's like, I want to know who is motivated by these emails. Who sees an e-blast and says, oh, you know, I have been meaning to give $2,500 to the organization. It slipped my mind.
Yeah.
I was on a cruise. I totally forgot.
So the least they can do is sing it to me over the phone.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
Right?
Or in the vein of like, yeah, perhaps, I don't know. I think it would be fun to have a robocall with actors from your season, and you like really plan it out to pull lines from the show.
All you do,
part of your ask.
Just say it's a hard knock life for us. Send us $2,500. Now, anything.
Help Annie find her way home.
There you go. Even though Annie's made $1 billion already, and we should have known what to do with the money.
Sandy's missing again, and so your $25,000 donation will really help us begin the search after we have a kickoff meeting to plan how we plan to find Sandy again.
And let's talk about those specifically for theater. There doesn't really seem to be, with rare exception, a grassroots campaign, because they get that money from us. If there's a special, like there's the Broadway flea market and you buy something, all the money goes there. Or if you go see somebody's cabaret act and they're donating all the money to the organization, or, different people have different charities they fight for. But other than that, if you have to pay over $1,000 to go to a gala to donate, and that may be a low number, then they're not really after us. They're just saying, oh, we are a theater, we're nonprofit, we're trying to put on theater, and we're catering to rich people.
You know what else is interesting about it? There are a lot of companies who are really, really focused on making sure that their ticket prices are accessible. So they are working to keep those prices low, but it does not cross their mind that is possibly something to do for these events as well.
Yeah.
To have an affordable price. And also, like, I know that there are capacity issues too, but when you factor in all of the obstacles you put in front of this event being successful, it becomes an elitist and exclusive event. Because again, like I've said before, it is tough to be a nonprofit whose programs must be hits, must be absolutely 100% successful.
And that's not the purpose of a nonprofit.
Yes.
That's the purpose of a commercial theater.
You can't even try things. Yes, absolutely. What happened? Why are all the nonprofits operating like they're commercial theaters on Broadway?
Yep. And especially in New York. We do understand, if you're a small town theater and I'm picking arbitrary state in the middle of Missouri or Indiana, and there isn't a theater within 200 miles of you, your audience may like to see Sound of Music again. And they may like a Christmas show. Nothing wrong. Get it. But why do you need to exist?
Shoot your eye out, Frankie. Yeah. Ralphie, not Frankie.
Ralphie, yes. Yeah, keep it. Let people know you know what you're talking about.
Ralphie, quick omission.
By the way, that's a
Christmas
nice
Story.
They turned that
musical.
into a nice musical.
It is. It's very good.
Yeah.
I tried to not like it. It was fun.
We're talking about A Christmas Story, just if you don't
Christmas
know.
Story, the musical. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I tried not to like it. It was just, I walked out of there with a smile on my face. It was really nice. On the other hand, you end up with a show like Hamilton this year, Merrily We Roll Along. They could ask for anything they want, and there are some rich people out there who would pay for the ticket.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you can,
Yeah.
then the question, and their argument is, hey,
then it's a question of ethics.
And then we have $40 seats, but you're in the last row. Well, there are senior citizens who can barely see and hear.
Yeah.
So that's where they're supposed to go.
I'm not trying to sound like I'm completely one-sided on this. Like, I actually understand.
I'm one-sided.
I actually understand both sides of the conversation. I also understand the struggle about it, and this is why arguably you need a committee. You need people who see, who have different ways of approaching this, because you might be so firm in your position, and it's only one path. It's only one thought process, and perhaps people need to hear it and be inspired by it and think beyond what you thought, if possible.
Mm-hmm.
And so if your view is limited, then you're not going to fully realize what is the right path forward. But I feel like now everybody's just so concerned about promises they made in the past that did not come through, and the future success of the organization is suffering because of it.
And let's talk about the elephant in the room, the pandemic.
Yeah.
Enough of excuses calling the pandemic the problem. It was.
Mm-hmm.
It did tremendous harm to so many things. A lot of money was wasted on people who should not have been paid during the pandemic, meaning the executives.
Mm-hmm.
There was no work for anyone, but the people who needed the money most got nothing. Then when we came out of the pandemic, many, certainly not all, many nonprofits had no money left because they had paid their executives at a time when there was nothing going on. And certainly they couldn't ask for donations during the pandemic.
Yeah.
So they used up their money. So now we come back and everybody needs money just to be alive. So we see a whole bunch of theater companies closing, and okay, that's part of survival of the fittest in a capitalistic society, right?
Someone to pay off our loan.
Oh, go for it. Go for it. I like that one. Thank you, Darnell. I enjoyed that.
I honestly, I feel like every theater company should walk into a bank with a jingle.
And this is worth saying. We're going back decades now, and I don't mind naming because I don't think they exist here. A chemical bank, which is now Chase, I guess. Who knows who's what?
Yeah.
But I walked into a chemical bank and with a bank account that had over $100,000 in for the theater company,
mm-hmm.
and said, because we want to have a specific project with a specific budget that must get paid back, we want to do this by taking out a loan against our bank account. We have the money. But we figured we'd do a loan and work it out that way and just get credit going.
Yeah.
And they said, wonderful idea. We're happy to do it. What's your business? Told them we do theater. They said, oh, we have a policy. We don't give loans to theaters. I said, you have $100,000 of our money. It's against our own. It doesn't matter. We are not allowed to issue loans for anything that has to do with entertainment.
Oh, I was going to say, so what if you just said, well, what if we're a production company?
No. Yeah. And actually, I'm fibbing a little bit. It had more to do with the music industry than it did theater. But it was the word they said was entertainment. Entertainment. And of course, that's changed. I mean, obviously, there's lots of money in some entertainment.
Well, I wonder how they do feel now, because every theater is struggling. So,
well, why would you give them money if they're struggling enough they may go under?
But also, yeah, and why would a theater walk into a bank? They didn't need money.
That's right. Absolutely. So what's a theater to do? Let's get right. I mean, and let's be clear to our audience, Darnell and Mitch do not have the answer. So we're going to float some ideas.
We're just full ideas.
Yeah.
Piss and vinegar.
There are some theater companies that are doing very well. Why aren't we talking to them as a community? Why aren't we learning? La Jolla Theater, God bless them. They do new work and they're doing very well. Yes, they live in a very affluent community of theater goers. That may be one answer. Steppenwolf Theater is still alive in Chicago. I don't know what their financial situation is, but they're still alive. And they're still creating tons of new work that gets to Broadway or just goes around the country. So they're doing good work. The Guthrie Theater, they're somewhat isolated up there in Minneapolis, St. Paul. But so they have kind of a locked-in audience, but they do absolute quality work. And to the best of my knowledge, they are not struggling. Everybody needs some money always. Why aren't we all starting new theater companies saying, how much can we charge the audience we want and only spend the amount we can make as tickets and not beg people for more money? Let's start there. If that means we can't pay anybody, then let me find 12 friends who will work for free to put on the first year's worth of shows. And let's profit share of how we get to the second year. If that doesn't work, we close. But let's give it a try. I will tell you, when I was a youngster, that's what we did. We really did that. Everybody worked for free. And we got through a few years and we actually broke even. And then we moved on.
Yeah, that's what I was saying last week. When I started my company, I knew I couldn't afford to pay everyone properly. And so we did everything we could to make sure everyone was comfortable and that nobody felt overworked. Like we had short rehearsals because it was better for everyone in their work schedules. And I was fortunate enough to have a space that I could schedule, without worrying too much about its availability. But it was like, if I didn't have that resource, I wouldn't have been able to do that. But I think they also knew all of the things, all the strings I was pulling to bring this show to open.
Sure. But by the way, I'm going to sidetrack you for a minute, but let's get right back to what you're saying.
Yeah.
As recently as today, I was exploring foundation grants and New York City grants given to artists, not to nonprofits. So if you are a playwright or a painter, you can apply directly and not worry about a 501(c) status. You just say, this is what I do. They say, as long as you're going to put your paintings up by next April, we'll give you $3,000 to help you pay your bills. It's that kind of situation. I clicked under, here are all the resources that you can get through our foundation grants. I clicked on the thing that said rehearsal space and performance space. The page that came up, we have nothing available.
All right.
So now we come back to the fact that certainly in New York City, and I can't speak, you're better off in Philly this way, but in New York City, there are less than maybe 20 spaces for rent and high rent that you can put on a play. So you need to raise a lot of money, even if you're doing this on a developmental level. And then you have to worry about getting the audience, and in New York City, marketing to an audience costs a fortune. So you're only going to invite your friends and family, and they'll bring some friends, and they won't pay you enough to pay back your expenses. So everybody who puts on a show in New York City is going to lose money unless you're on Broadway. Excuse me, unless you're the 10% of Broadway that can make money. So that's I'm not trying to depress everybody. We do this because art and culture is important. And it's a crapshoot, but you have a chance of creating something pretty wonderful.
Yeah.
Right? But we have to figure out, like, in the same way that England used to do it, it may have to be an industry that must be subsidized, if nothing else, to have rehearsal and performance space. By the way, in the old days, quote unquote, my youth, churches and temples used to offer their space for free for little theater groups that wanted to come in. That we have a basement. Yeah, you can't use it every hour on the hour, but that was for free. You would have certain theaters that would say, well, we have nothing going on at 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. on a Thursday. You want the space, come on in and work there. Now it costs thousands.
Yeah.
Colleges used to say, we want to work with new companies. Now they can't even figure out the dance department versus the theater department, how to have them talk civilly to each other. So you can't get anything done. And the students don't show up on time. This is a new problem post-pandemic. You want to work in this industry, you show up late once, I don't need you. There are too many actors and dancers out there who want the job.
That's bureaucracy.
Sing to me. Okay, I'm
parodying everything today.
My tirade is over. Let's go back to what you were talking about.
I was just saying, starting out, it was modest, and you automatically thought about so I automatically adopted the mindset of caring for the people that work for us. Mm-hmm. And I knew, like I said, I knew we couldn't compensate them very well, but we did other things to make them comfortable and so that they enjoy being with us. And, of course, that you can't do that forever. I always had it in my mind. I was like, I might be able to get away with that for a couple of seasons. But after that, I got to figure out a way that we make enough money to properly fund the next show, Right. I was just looking at first, I was like, if we have any money left over that we can put towards the next show, great, but then you have to start coming up with more goals. And then I feel like, at least here in Philadelphia, like we have an organization, Theater Philadelphia. It's a great organization.
Yes, it is.
But it is a marketing focused organization. It is not art service in the way that it doesn't have a membership model. Mm-hmm. Like the older version of this organization had a membership model. And I think it just allows people to have more ownership over what the organization does. And so without that membership model, it feels like we're just buying into it temporarily. And so I think that is kind of without an organization directly focusing on supporting theater companies, it does feel like we are out here on our own. And I think that is starting to resonate more because like the organizations of a certain level are communicating with each other. And then, the ones that are of lower levels are struggling together. And they have different concerns and goals. Like the things that they prioritize are not the same as what the larger organizations prioritize. Like a smaller, newer organization wants more diversity, equity, and inclusion. Uh-huh. But a larger organization is like, we just bought new seats and we need butts in every single one of them. And it's like, I think everybody can attest that they did not get into theater to be a business. They got into theater because of the love of the art form. They want to celebrate it and uplift it, be a part of its creation, and so on. But it's like, wait, I'm a building manager now? I'm managing. I have 12 contracts I'm managing, like whatever you have to do to maintain the infrastructure is not what was intended and wasn't even taught in the theater program.
Not at all. And so let's talk about what is successful about Broadway, and that people can make a living and still do wonderful productions of new and revived works. So that is a success. They're not all reimagined, trust me.
Yes.
Sometimes they just say, oh, they used to have 47 people in the orchestra when they did Camelot. Let's have 47 people. Why? It's anyway. But people get paid. They have a home and a family. Some of them work 7 days a week, and some of them work 14 hours a day to do that, so they don't see their family.
Yeah.
But at least they're in the business and they're able to do it. But why should Broadway be the only place that all these creative people who want to participate can make a living? And we're not talking about rich. We're talking about a living. So I don't know I do have an answer for it, but nobody wants to hear that. Because Broadway needs to subsidize the rest of, and not just Broadway, needs to help subsidize the rest of the industry. The hits make so much money. Of course, the investors are going, I took a giant risk. I want every penny you can give me. And my answer is giving up 0.5% of your total profit after you've already made 150% back to put into a fund that might help struggling people with a little bit so that they can continue to operate, that maybe they create the next Broadway show or the next regional theater production or the next Christmas show or whatever. What's wrong with that? Well,
yeah,
no one's talking about that. They just don't go there. The government, and here we go again, we're not a pure capitalistic system. I know Republicans and conservatives don't like this, but the bottom line is you wouldn't have a PBS station without some funding from the government. So during the pandemic, we had some funding from the government. It was unfortunately abused.
Yeah.
Not by everybody, but by some people. And I do know companies that did not abuse it, and they're still around. So, the others used it for the wrong thing. They kept their buildings open and they paid their executives their money. But meanwhile, that was the right idea. But it doesn't seem like anyone thinks the arts, you might as well just have television and film. They make lots of money. So who needs theater if it can't sustain itself? That seems to be the attitude.
Yeah, but nothing sustains itself alone. I was saying in a meeting the other day, I was like, Ford Motor Company can't operate without a loan.
Right?
It can't. It has to make its product first before it sells it. How is that not a theater?
Because you know what it is? And by the way, investors have said this to me many times. If you owned a building, we know you could always sell the building to pay us back. And I'm going, that's not who we are as an industry. Yes, I get that. If I had a building, but right now, our ownership is something that doesn't have a hard wall to it. It's a play or a musical or an event that may have a future and may not. And your investment, you can make a choice which thing you like and don't like. But stockbrokers, and as I say, some of my best friends are, they're scared to death. By the way, this may be a good time to bring up, just as an educational thing. During the
our sponsor. We are sponsored by nobody. If you want to be a sponsor.
Broadway has a tax credit that has never existed before.
Yeah.
Now, in film and television, if an investor loses a lot of money, they can actually write a portion of it off their taxes. So there is something for that. Theater Broadway specifically does not. I don't know quite why. I don't know why they haven't thought of this, but they won't give it to them. Instead, what they came up with was a tax credit for the producers of the show, which says we will give you, for example, if you spend $3 million on your scenery, we'll give you a tax credit of up to, and I'm making this number up, $250,000 of it will give you a tax credit against the taxes the show owes.
Mm.
And they have this in different categories. So that means that your show has a chance to continue because now you have less financial obligation that has to get paid back, right? Sounds good. The reality is it can take 18 months for the government to send you the money. Shows close in 2 weeks after they open. Therefore, they never get their tax credit, nor can they be sure they can continue running because they don't know if they're going to get their tax credit. You have to fill out a lot of paperwork, and you have to involve your accountants, which costs a lot of money. So therefore, to date, I don't think anyone has gotten help. Which now should, again, here we go, the administrators. Who's running this crap?
Yeah.
Right? The foundations. Who is here's my other favorite one. I don't want to name them because I like them in the organization in general. But there was a foundation grant announced last October. If we will give you up to $8,000 to an artist who is putting on theater that they wrote to help them just put on some version of it. But they have to do it in the early part of 2024. Okay, this was from back in October. Mm. The forms weren't very long, but you have to fill them out. You have to submit your stuff. If you get it in on time, that's great. However, after everyone submitted it, they put out an announcement saying, we're not going to tell who got the award until April of 2024. But the requirement is that you have to produce your show in the first part of 2024. Mm. So you have to have the money before you get the money, and then you don't even know if you're going to get the money. And the artists didn't have the money in the first place, which is why they applied for the money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is what the arts are up against. So
it's always like, go get the people to back you for the money you actually need, mm-hmm. and then we'll reimburse you.
Well, yeah,
but you need the money. You need the money, and if you just got the money from the program, you wouldn't have to go and chase people around.
Well, and you're not going to get the money from people to chase around if you're doing a new show in which you aren't charging the audience or charging them $20 or less. You can never pay back $8,000. So you need that as a grant. Otherwise, you personally are going to lose it. Hmm. So what we need are angels. In the old days, they used to call the investors angels, not investors on Broadway who want their money back. These are angels who say, you know what? I think a chorus line is going to be a gigantic hit, and it's going to help fund the nonprofit that I believe in. Therefore, I will donate a bunch of money and take the chance that it's going to succeed for someone else, meaning a theater company, to benefit from it. And that's what happened for a chorus line. There were no investors in a chorus line. It was a nonprofit that got one donation from one angel that paid for the entire show to go to Broadway and funded 20 years of productions at the New York Shakespeare Festival.
Wow.
Where are these people? Where are they? And of course, now let's go back to pandemic. Is that what caused the problem? Are they just not there?
I don't know. The way I'd been describing it, not blaming the pandemic, but was saying like, we were in a car that was speeding down the highway, and then the pandemic slammed on the brakes in that car. And once the car stopped, we realized, why were we going that fast anyway? And I think a lot of people just saw an opportunity to slow down, to literally get out of the car. And I think for everything, right. People who are consistently supporting, said, you know what? I may have lost some family members and I need to prioritize differently. Yes, I was serving this community and I love this community, but maybe I want to be closer to my family. They're just changing their minds about things. But it's not even a problem that they're doing that. It's a problem that we relied so heavily on them, as if they would be here forever.
Right.
And it's the same thing about the grant opportunities too. They weren't promised to be here forever. There are organizations who are saying like, we'll just keep submitting to them and then they'll recognize us one day, and could be seriously disappointed when they find out that program is going to fold, or that program has different restrictions, like they keep moving the line. And so you thought that your time would come and it never comes. And this is such a racket, because I don't know how a producing artistic director can focus on the artistic vision also while they're chasing everybody for money.
And that is, you hit the nail on the head. That it's not that, look, money is needed. And yes, theater is a business, especially if you're going to pay salaries to anybody. So that's something that we should have learned early on. However, you don't get the brilliant pieces of theater which turn into TV and movies, and you don't get that entertainment without people just concentrating on the art. You need a combination. So the question is, can we do it without relying? That doesn't mean we don't ask people to help us, but can we do it without relying on other people's money? How does that work? But you see, to me, this is the conference that we all need to talk to each other about. Do we go back, even as adults, and say, you know what, get a job working at the local bookstore and spend every evening working, till 3 o'clock in the morning on your art forum, which is, I already am choking saying things like that. But that won't help certain kinds of work, certain kinds of theater work or entertainment work. They take a tremendous amount of time and effort. But if that's the only answer, then perhaps that's what we have to do. At a certain age, do we want to?
Yes.
Right?
I know. I feel like everyone's tired.
Yeah.
Everyone's tired.
Even those without money went through the pandemic. We all want to slow down a little bit. But the one thing I don't like, and drives me crazy, is these large nonprofits who are begging for money. It's like, you're not telling me what you're doing for the community or for me, and all you're doing is saying, well, we're only charging $40 at the door, but our tickets actually cost $250 at the door, so I'm going to ask you to pay the difference. Why? Why would I give you the money for that? Even if I like you. I'd prefer on Broadway, you pay $250 a ticket. That's what it costs. That's what you pay. So, and on Broadway, they have to pay taxes. Nonprofits don't even have to pay taxes. So what's the problem here? But my biggest bitch, if you'll excuse the expression, is that we're not discussing it. You, Darnell, and I are discussing it. Alan Harrison last week, when we interviewed him, he's discussing it.
Yeah.
Where are the people running Broadway? Are they discussing it? I don't think so. I think they're just trying to hold on to the old way of doing things as long as they can.
Yeah. And I don't know why there's just, I don't, and I can't really figure out like why I don't do this, but like people hold on so tightly to the familiar, and I understand that, but like they're blinded by it and can't realize that it's not working. And it's not about like, let's just have change for change's sake. No, all the change that's being introduced, that is being championed, is necessary change. But it requires them to acknowledge something that they're not willing to admit. Like there's kind of like a new assault or a continued assault on DEI, and I think that's because people did not know how to support it and are just looking for opportunities to dismantle it so that they can go back to ignoring the problem that prompted DEI to begin with.
And for our audience, make sure it's diversity,
equity, and
inclusion.
There were many programs that were spun up, throughout the pandemic, having to do with a lot of the civil unrest that happened in those years around the pandemic, and they were not warmly received. A lot of people felt like attacked because snowflakes. A lot of people felt really emotional about the fact that they were being acknowledged as potential racists or people who were not equitable in their practices, or their organization was not diverse enough. As they look through a sea of white board members and leadership level is all the same hue, there's no diversity there. And so those conversations prompted, like, we need change. We need more involvement from everyone who is the makeup of our community, our world that we're trying to serve. And it just doesn't make sense. This is also the situation everybody's in right now. I mean, look at these high-end donors. Most of them,
that's right,
are stereotypically white. And so because you didn't cultivate a diverse audience, you don't have enough people to support your organization anymore. Because, when people decide that they are done, paying attention in that direction, they're just going to stop. And, there's still tons of people who are not supported by your organization, who are not supported by our industry, who don't feel like they belong. Again, we talked before about affinity nights. I'm not a fan. I just wish they didn't exist. That they didn't have to exist, but I understand why they are here and why they're necessary. But we wouldn't have to do that had we not actively ignored the makeup of our society.
It's not like, and it's the part of the argument that is never discussed.
Yeah.
Why is there an affinity night? Again, let's talk about it. That's where the audience, the Black audience specifically, is invited to a night. No one is excluded. Everyone can still buy a ticket. But it's like, let's get the group together, the family together, to see a particular show because of its theme, to give support. It also, and to just have, I'll have to put it this way. We had, it follows the thing where people say you can meet the playwright after the show. I've worked on a musical where we brought in Martha and the Vandellas from the 1960s, and we brought in Bo Diddley after the show just to attract the audience that wanted to see a 50s musical. Right? It's the same thing. The thing is, if no one recognizes why that's needed, that's the problem. To argue, oh, you shouldn't have it, is not an answer.
Yeah.
And the discussion isn't, oh, I don't understand this, and then please explain it to me. It's, oh, this is horrible, let's get rid of DEI. But that's also the troop that wants to say no to everything. And there are a lot of people who are very negative. There are a lot of trolls. There are a lot of racists. There are a lot of just people who I want things to be the 1950s again. Well, that was the 1950s for white people only, right?
Yeah.
Nobody wants to go back to, I think, to the 1950s for black people.
No, and
Right?
every time you talk about the good old days, you're basically saying, back when they didn't matter.
Right. Or
Yeah.
that I didn't have to look at them, or they didn't have to go to school with them.
Yeah.
Right. So, and theater, one of the things, and from people listening, one of the things that we've noticed that even as many plays and musicals have diversified on stage, we are still fighting the fight for behind the scenes. One, because in not so long ago, unions, and there are 18 unions on Broadway, unions would only allow new members in if they were related to the people who were already in the union. You had to be sponsored. So that's
like a credit union.
if you were part of, and I'm not disparaging them, but I don't want to name the name of the family, but there was an Italian family that I worked with on a number of shows, and delightful, smart, wonderful people, all the nice things I'm supposed to say. There were 6 of them in the union of all different ages. They sponsored each other, and there are a limited number of jobs for stagehands.
Yeah.
Right? So at that point, the state had to create a law to break up the union from being the one to decide who gets into their union.
Mm-hmm.
It had to be a law. Not that these particular Italian family men were trying to keep black people out. They were looking out for their family.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't create a rule that said, oh, we can't let any black people in. But they didn't care.
Yeah.
And that's what we're all fighting now. People don't care. So how do we break that behind the scenes, which then gives us a new world, a new energy, and just some equity, some fairness?
Well, I feel like if you were to pose that question, the first response would be, well, I don't think I don't care. The thing is, people have a hard time admitting that what we see is actually what's going on. And I think that is very frustrating, especially when you're just calling it how I see it. This is how I see it. I could be wrong, but if I'm seeing that and it's not accurate, you still owe it to yourself to question, like, how are you able to see that from this?
Mm-hmm.
If I don't see that, what am I missing? Or was there anything extra that you brought to this overall observation, or what? It just prompts more questions. But if the response is like dismissive and, sort of gaslighting, like this isn't happening, that's not really what's going on.
Well, it's not and I'm not trying to insult anybody, but I am. It's not an educated response.
Yeah.
Right? And by educated, I just mean open your mind and say, oh, somebody thinks this. What does that mean? What more can I learn about it? Mm-hmm. Rather than react to it. We don't need more people reacting. Lord knows it's all over politics. We just need people who are willing to open their ears, think a little bit, listen, try to understand something, and then they have their opinion. That's fine. But first you have to be open to ideas and to other people. Anyway, taking that back, there's an important step that a large part of the audience, there is a much larger minority audience, and I mean Asian, Puerto Rican, Black, Latinx audience on Broadway than there was before DEI. So that is good for Broadway and nonprofits also. You're bringing in a new audience. You're saying you are welcome here. And that there are people backstage at the ticket booth, the ushers, people promoting it in the advertising agency. Oh, how many advertising agencies are almost all white on Broadway, if not everywhere else? I mean, these are things that are noticed, and also affects how we sell things and to whom. So, along with all these problems, and it doesn't cost anything to do DEI. That's the other thing. I mean, always the excuse in the past is, but that's going to cost me money to do ADA, to put in some ramp, or an elevator for someone who can't walk up the stairs. That it costs money. Oh, it doesn't cost money to do DEI.
Yeah.
You know? Anyway.
Yeah, well, it does. It does when instead of finding the right people, you try to turn the wrong person into the person who leads the effort of DEI in your company.
Oh.
Yeah, which I saw a lot of that. It was like, why is this person the head of your DEI program? And if they were already here, it also just feels like no one who's currently in your organization should have been running that, you know?
Yeah.
Like, you got to get somebody from the outside. There's a problem inside your organization.
Okay, now, but let's talk about hierarchy. Let's slide this over. So we understand American corporations. Now, a nonprofit theater, there seems to be a dictator at every nonprofit theater. Sometimes it's two. The artistic director, it could be a producing artistic director, therefore it is one person. An artistic director, a managing director, sometimes an executive director, but they're usually part of the fundraising for the board. So we'll put them aside from it. They're not really making decisions, day-to-day decisions. So if somebody working for you, or God forbid, Darnell, let's say you have a particular idea of how something might be run, but you have no authority over making that decision, or no influence, perhaps. No substantial influence. We can all open our mouth. Then maybe that's the wrong system for a theater. I can't argue about General Motors or Ford. Yeah, I don't understand those companies, right? Yeah. I did work for Disney. Disney has 287 vice presidents. They make decisions, but you can argue with them. The guy at the very top kind of is your check and balance to make sure that it fits within his overall, and it's a he, his overall vision for the entire company. But it's still, there are dictators there. But in a little nonprofit, you've got 10 people at most on a staff. There's one person telling everyone else what they have to do, whether it's good or bad.
Yeah.
How do we change that? What else can we do?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I feel like, and it's kind of been some guidance. Like, if you feel like you can't move forward in an organization, or you feel like you're not being heard, you might have to go somewhere else. Unless you care enough about this organization to realize that you have to maybe find another approach, or you have to just speak up more. And sometimes the cut and run seems like the easiest solution, especially if you're not just quitting. Like, you're saying, like, they don't want to do this here, so I got to go somewhere that they would, or I have to be the one who does it.
But that, first of all, may not be possible. There aren't that many jobs. Second, because there's no promotion system in most of the nonprofits, if you start out doing group sales, there's no chance that you're going to move your way up to becoming managing director ever. You will not be considered. And then you have to worry about the managing director leaving before there's an opening, because no one gets fired. The board, even though they're supposed to oversee this, they don't know who they have.
Yeah.
So I forgive me, everybody, for being so negative, but I'm really trying to. I'm trying to analyze this. So that's all this is about. We're having
Just being
an
real.
open
Just being
discussion.
real.
So you have a well-intentioned board, people who want to see this thing work out. You have well-intentioned people working for you who are giving you 110%. Why isn't the thing working? That is, I'd say, at least 90% of our nonprofit theaters.
Yeah.
So now you have to look. That's why I'm saying something isn't working. And it shouldn't be, oh, you don't like the fact that I made you work on Hello Dolly for the 12th time and that I don't listen to your opinions, but you have to show up and give me 12-hour days for $200 a week. All you can do is quit. That can't be the only answer. And I have ideas and I have proposals. They're not worth sharing at the point because I don't know who's even considering looking for them. They're not. Yeah. You're talking about people just trying to keep alive and survive in the old system that was pre-pandemic. Mm-hmm. And until maybe they just all need to fail. And maybe we need to let the ones that can't survive fail.
Yeah, well, that's all. Yeah, that's always a thought that perhaps we should just let it fail and then pick it up from there. But like and then you're also in this mindset of like, yeah, but I don't want it to die.
Why not?
I just want them to realize we're dying, and then maybe the thing is like people have to be forced out of everything. Mm-hmm. You know, people don't wake up and realize that maybe I've run my course here, or perhaps I need to step aside, let somebody else, or perhaps I need to acknowledge that I am not enough and I need more support. You know, because sometimes it's people don't want to admit that what they've been asked to do is way too much for one person to do, period. You know, sure, if you're looking at, you've got the entire year to oversee this laundry list of things. Perhaps in that sense, it seems like this isn't a lot of work to do. But what isn't being recognized in smaller organizations is that often a lot of these things are due at the same time. Like they all need to happen at the same time. And so if you're giving somebody 4 or 5 tasks, but they all need to be delivered at the same time, how is this not college? How are we not like in here cramming? Like, we all couldn't wait to get out of the school system. We took our education and we moved forward. It's like, I thought I was done writing book reports. Now I've got to do another book report. It's just, there is I think there is a general mindset of like, who can we blame? And we just hover in that space of gray because we don't actively want to identify what the real problem is. Well, and it also contributes to nothing happening.
And which we're doing it, we're trying to figure out what the real problem is.
I think the real problem is leadership. It's not that the leadership was always terrible. It's that this should be a sign that perhaps we need to seek new leadership.
And the only person who can make that decision is not a person, is the board. And the board is across the board. And I'm not talking about individuals.
In the pocket of the artistic leader.
They're incompetent because they didn't take this on as a job.
Yeah.
They took it on to say, how nice of you to be interested in my opinion. I want a theater to exist. I want it on my resume. I'm willing to give X amount of thousands of dollars a year to help support this thing. And I will read the financial report and listen to the artistic director tell me what they're doing, and then rubber stamp it. But they don't know how, even if the artistic director quits, they don't know how to find a new one because they were hired by the artistic director, not the other way around. Mm-hmm. So if the board created the nonprofit, then it's their nonprofit. They could decide how long they want you there. But but our system doesn't work that way. Our system is dictatorship, and then because it is required by law, we have a board of directors who rubber stamp things. And in rare cases say, no, you can't spend that. in rare cases.
And the only way to protect you from their ignorance is D&O insurance. What an interesting episode. I don't think there was besides my chiming in, which was more sarcastic than it was whimsical. Let's end on a high-ish note, on a fun note.
That's my high note.
Okay, so yesterday I saw Message in a Bottle at Miller Theater here in Philadelphia. It's a piece that it's all movement and dance, and it's inspired by the music of Sting, and it's about wartime violence and displacement. And it's
thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs sideways.
I would say thumbs up. It is a visual delight. I mean,
wow.
The choreography never stops, and it's beautiful, and the set design is simplistic but also pretty involved. Like, everything's flat until it's not, like things come out, things turn around, and so on. And yeah, it was so well done. Like, I remember hearing about it when I was at New York City Center, and I didn't know anything other than the elements. Everybody kept saying it was an interesting piece. And to see it last night, I think the audience was floored too. I feel like the audience did not know what to expect, and they were pleasantly surprised.
That's great to hear. While we're going through things, out of the nominees this year, some of which will not be around past Tony Awards, I saw Illinois. I qualified only that if you don't love dance, it probably isn't your cup of tea, but for those of us who can be inspired
Gotta dance.
No. Can be inspired by great choreography and great dancers telling a great story to great music. And it's based on an album, a pre-existing album, but that was never intended to be a theater piece. And it's live singing, but not the dancers. The dancers do nothing but dance, and they are the actors on stage. The singers are off to the side. But what an amazing evening of theater. I don't know if it's a Broadway musical or not. All I know is there's music, there's dance, and I was involved from beginning to end. I saw The Outsiders, which has a great chance of being named Best Musical. I am not a fan of coming-of-age stories, and that's what this is. It's kind of West Side Story, takes place in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And it goes back to those days. Parts of the story are very involving. Some of the music is very involving. There's great dancing in it. The acting is superb. I don't know what I think of it. How do you like that for an answer? Water for Elephants. Again, the same director as Kimberly Akimbo, and she did a great job. The story doesn't fascinate me, but it was done phenomenally. It was a wonderful, exciting production. That's me. Those who like the book or have seen this stuff, they may feel differently. And what else? Notebook. If you're going to cry at the movie, you're going to cry at the Broadway show. It is perhaps a little too long, perhaps phenomenally put together. The acting is great. The story is the same as the movie, but it's done theatrically. And the singing, the music is pretty damn good. I don't think I would call it a best musical, but who am I? You just got me. I ran through 4 shows. Merrily, of course. Merrily We Roll Along. Damn it, what a great production. What a great show. What great performances. Just walked out of there on a high. So
here's to Merrily. Who's like Merrily?
Oh, God. Go ahead. Let's see it. We're old friends, Darnell. You and me. We should end on that note.
We're just 2 friends. 2 good friends. 2 best friends.
Like, and who's like us? Damn few.
Who's like us? Damn few.
Yeah, I'll let you do the singing. I'm not going to risk it. All right. On that note, we resolved nothing. And the subtitle this week should have been, and we resolved nothing.
No, it's everything. Everyone is tired.
Yeah.
The rejected title. Yes. But that's the business of theater, a working title. I'm Darnell Radford.
I'm Mitch Weiss.
And we will see you in the theater.
Yay.
Thank you for listening. Tune in next time for another episode of The Business of Theater, a working title, with Darnell Radford and Mitch Weiss. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Share the podcast with a friend, colleague, or give us some social media love. This podcast is an Emory production. Visit us online at em3ry.com/TBOT. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at em3ryotm.